Do you want to introduce everybody, Amy, and then I'll go through the housekeeping?
Sure. Welcome everyone to our early intervention transition to kindergarten parent center presentation. I am Amy Hiller. I'm the supervisor of special education K-3. Thanks for joining us tonight. Tonight I have with me Katie Eller, our autistic support teacher at Upper Providence Elementary School. Chris Talley, supervisor of special education grades 4 through 6. Kenya Kistler is our school psychologist at Limerick Elementary School. And Jennifer Smaracki is the program administrator at the MCIU.
All right, so as we go through the presentation, everybody, at the bottom of your screen in Zoom, I'm not sure what it's like on mobile. I believe it's at the bottom as well. It might be in the top right, couple dots, hit Q&A. As we're going through today, if you have any questions, drop them in there. I'll be monitoring that. And then at the end, once the presentation's over, we'll go through the Q&A and I'll ask the questions. And if there's any very direct questions, I'll have them sent to Amy or one of the presenters if it's a very direct question. But otherwise, at the end, we will be going over the Q&As, all right? And if they are answered during the presentation, I also probably won't ask them at the end.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. All right. So before the early intervention transition meetings start, we work very closely with the MCIU. Springfield Area School District works collaboratively with representatives from the IU. We're lucky to have Jen with us tonight to support families as they transition from preschool EI to school-based services for their kindergarten year. Prior to the transition meetings that we hold the year prior to entering kindergarten, we do require, the MCIU requires the parents to sign a record release form. This is extremely important for us as a district because it then allows the IU to share your child's records with the district and our transition team so that we're able to prep for these meetings. So that would be the first step. Then our Springford transition team collects the following information. We get the early intervention evaluation or reevaluation report, as well as your child's early intervention IEP. We also have a Google form that we have posted on our website, which is the parent input form. And this is really important for our team as well, to collect this information from you as the parent prior so that we have the information ready for when we are meeting at our transition meeting. The next step is the transition meeting. So we hold 3 meetings starting in December. So our first transition meeting this year is actually December 7th, and we have another one December 14th, and then another one in January right after the break. In attendance at the meeting, we have a representative from the IU. So this year it will be Jen Smaracki. We have me, the special education supervisor. A school psychologist will be at the transition meetings. That would either be Kenya or Naomi Morissette is another one of our school psychologists that attends these meetings. And we have a Springford speech and language pathologist as well that is part of the transition meeting. If your child receives speech support. Like I said, we hold them in December and January, and it's the year prior to your child entering kindergarten. So if your child is set to come to kindergarten next year, then your transition meeting with our district would be this December or January. The MCIU will be scheduling your transition meetings, so they would be reaching out to give you that date. Some things that we discuss, we'll go over, like I said, that parent input form, which is really important. So we're looking at your child's strengths, their areas of need. We're looking at their current early intervention programming, as well as we go through the evaluation process and next steps. And then shortly after, we issue a permission to reevaluate, which will go over exactly what areas we are looking at when we are doing our reevaluation. The transition meetings are held via Zoom. We started doing that last year, and it ended up working out really great. It's a 30-minute group time slot, so you would go into a Zoom room with your transition team members. This is very important to attend the transition meeting because it helps build a collaborative and trusting relationship between the district and family, and as well as we provide the guidance and support to families so that we can best program for your child when they enter kindergarten. These are some options for your child's transition, different things that the district and the family can decide. So we do have the option to adopt and implement your child's preschool early intervention IEP. So this has happened before if we've had families move into our district over the summer, where we would not have enough time to do that reevaluation over the summer. We would adopt, implement the preschool IEP, and then conduct the reevaluation during that kindergarten year. There's another option to adopt the IEP with revisions. Option 3, we would reevaluate and test to determine if the child is still eligible for services. Option 4 is to do a reevaluation with a record review. And then option 5 is to waive the reevaluation and develop an IEP. In Springford, we are looking at option 3 and 4 most often. So where we're looking at deciding if we want to do a reevaluation with testing or a record review. And then if your child is found eligible for school age services, we would then develop an IEP once the reeval has been completed. And that would all be done prior to the end of the school year, prior to the child entering kindergarten. Registering your child is very important. Attending the transition meeting does not mean that your child's registered. So in order for us to go through our transition process, the registration needs to be complete. So your first step to register would be going on our website and filling out the kindergarten online pre-registration form. And like I said, that is listed on our district website with a link there. And your second step is there's a registration documentation checklist, which lists all of the items that our registrar would need to complete your registration. And kindergarten enrollment for next school year begins on March 1st, but you can start filling out the pre-registration form online sooner than that to get the ball rolling there. If you have any questions regarding registration, our district registrar, Noelia Castillo, is a great point of contact there, and her information is below. So the next step after the transition meeting is the evaluation process. So this kind of just gives a brief overview of what we're doing and what we're looking at. So like I said, we are issuing the permission to reevaluate. So that would either be, I would issue that via email for you to sign electronically or through the mail or both, whatever the parent prefers. After we receive consent for the reevaluation, we have 60 calendar days to conduct the reeval. And then if the student is eligible for services, we would then develop the IEP 30 days later. All right, Kenya, I'm going to turn to you for the next piece.
All right, so the reevaluation for a child transitioning from early intervention into school age needs to be done because there are slightly different eligibility categories when a child enters kindergarten. So we need to often reevaluate to see if a child now meets one of those disability categories in order to get services as a kindergarten student. As part of that reevaluation, one or more of these would be included, often more than one is included. It could include an assessment of your child's cognitive functioning, which is really just looking at how do they take in information? How do they process that information? What are their strengths and needs in the area of expressing what they know and problem solving? So we would look at that. Also looking at their academic readiness. What skills are they coming in regards to those? What we would consider, those typical academic skills, letters, numbers, shapes, colors. Do they have a good foundation of academic readiness skills to start kindergarten? Also looking at social, emotional, behavioral skills, sort of the development of those skills in your child. Where are they in each of those areas? And that's often done through rating scales, parent and teacher would complete. Individual measures of perceptual functioning can also be done, looking sometimes at visual perception, especially if your child's getting OT or something like that. We also might look at adaptive skills. That's your child's sort of day-to-day independent living skills, even though we know they're quite dependent on you still, but what they can do at their age level, with a little bit of independence. We may include an FBA, a functional behavior assessment, which again is looking at if your child's getting any behavior support currently in their program through early intervention. We would want to look at whether your child continues to present with a need for more specially designed behavior support through an FBA, or if a classroom management system that the teacher already has in place might be, effective when your child transitions to kindergarten. If your child is currently receiving speech and language services, we would also then look at speech and language to see if they still have needs in those areas, what growth they've made, how they're doing on their goals. Similar with OT and PT. Those would be included in a reevaluation if your child is currently receiving that, or if any documentation that we've reviewed indicates that there are needs in those areas that would need to be further investigated through, an assessment and evaluation. And then hearing and vision, your child might have hearing or vision needs, and so we might pursue looking at that more in depth through a hearing or vision assessment as well. So some of the informal data, so those are more formal, those are more sort of standardized tests and rating forms and, many different steps in each of those assessments. Informal data, not any less important and valuable, is input from a teacher. They may have more than one teacher, or they may have changed teachers over the years, so that's helpful for us to get teacher input. Your input as well is very important, and that can be done through interviews, conversations over the phone, our transition meeting forms that you would fill out. A student interview is typically limited at this age. We can do that just through working with the students during testing, or if they're drawing a picture, kind of talk about what they're drawing, but there's no real in-depth interview with our little EI guys coming in. Classroom observations. Over the past year or so, those have looked a little bit different given the COVID restrictions. And this year, I think we'll be navigating that. Some preschools may allow team members to go in to observe. Some of it still might be done virtually. Some of our observations of your child and how they respond to academic tasks may only be during our testing. So observations might look a little bit different depending on the situation. We are going to look at IEP progress reports, how your child is doing in each of their goal areas, as well as whatever progress reports your school has, whether that be just informal, or if they have like some sort of report card, we would also review those. We would also look at behavioral and attendance data. If there was any attendance information that's helpful for our team to know if there was a gap in education, as well as any instances where behavior support was needed or recommended or was present in your child's preschool career. And then finally, actually usually the first step in our evaluation is to review existing records. And that's really, any academic, medical, therapeutic, if your child does receive services through an outside agency that provides services at home or through, community-based, we would also want to look at all those records because your child is brand new to us, and we want to make sure that we are learning as much as we can about your child so that when we complete our reevaluation, it's as comprehensive as a picture as we can make to help the IEP team, if your child is eligible for an IEP, or their classroom teacher, or wherever their school team is, make their transition to kindergarten as seamless as possible. And that's why all this information is really helpful. So we are, once you sign that permission to reevaluate, it does start sort of a 60-day timeline, and that is calendar days. And that's just sort of our boundary within which to work. And at the end of that 60 days, you would then be issued this reevaluation report. And this really just summarizes what I've talked about so far. All of this will be done in that 60 days. So you can see there's lots of different steps, and usually there'll be some communication of where we are in the process, if we need additional records, if you have any questions. So all of these steps, could be happening at the same time. They might not happen sequentially, but they will all be conducted as part of that reevaluation. And at the end, eligibility for special education services as a school-age child will be determined. And then from there, the next step would be, what will that look like for your child? How will we support your child at school? So here, your child, in order to be eligible for special education as a school-age child, so again, we're talking about school-age kindergarten as opposed to preschool early intervention. They look a little bit different. Your child does have to meet eligibility criteria, which we are looking at through our reevaluation in one of these eligibility categories. So you can see there an intellectual disability, and some of these are similar to early intervention: hearing impairment, including deafness, a speech or language impairment, a visual impairment, including blindness, an emotional disturbance, an orthopedic impairment, autism, traumatic brain injury, and other health impairment, a specific learning disability, deaf, blindness, or multiple disabilities. So those are the categories that the evaluation team is going to be looking at. Does your child meet eligibility criteria? Any one of these, or one or more, that could also be the scenario. But I do want to just note there, developmental delay, which your child might have currently as their eligibility category, is not a school age disability category, which is why oftentimes we will reevaluate, and we will be looking at these categories instead. So developmental delay will not be on your school age reevaluation report. So that's just something to keep in mind. We will not be looking at that, as that's not one of the categories included. And the second prong to that is, if your child does meet eligibility criteria for one of those categories, does your child also need special education, specially designed instruction as determined by the team? And again, there's many people on this team, including you. And then that would lead to the next step, which is, I think we missed one, but the next step would be, if your child does qualify, then it go to an IEP. Sometimes we might find that a child does meet criteria for one of these categories. However, based on the evaluation, we find that they don't need specially designed instruction. They actually might need more accommodations through a 504 service plan. And that would look different from an IEP. It's not the same thing. That is another avenue by which your child could get accommodations, not modifications or specially designed instruction, to meet their needs. And it is also possible that your child may not meet eligibility for any one of these categories, and therefore not be eligible or in need of special education. So I just wanted to point out there are several different scenario outcomes here following the completion of a reevaluation.
Thank you, Kenya. All right, so like Kenya mentioned, if your child is eligible for special education, our next step would be to develop an IEP for kindergarten. So if, like I had mentioned before, we're also looking for your child to be registered within our school district to be able to develop that IEP for kindergarten. I know many parents have kind of been on the fence about whether or not some parents have been thinking about if they want to stay in early intervention for another year, if they continue to be eligible for that. That has happened before. I would encourage you, if you're on the fence about it, wanting to stay in early intervention for another year, if you're eligible, to still go through our process to see what the IEP programming would look like, and then make that determination at that point. But if you absolutely know that you are going to keep your child in early intervention for another year, you would let your MCIU case manager know, and then you would not need to go through our process. And that is, again, if you would be eligible with the IU to continue for another year in early intervention. Other parents have also been unsure about if they want to come to our district for kindergarten or to go to private kindergarten. I know that has come up a lot as well. So again, if you're on the fence, I still encourage you to go through the process to see what we can offer in kindergarten. If you are, even if you are thinking that you want to go to private kindergarten, I would still encourage you to see what we can offer, because if you are not registered in our district, we would not be able to, we would not implement the IEP in private kindergarten. You would have to be, you could be registered under dual enrollment to get related services, but that is all we would provide in that avenue. So if once the IEP is developed, the IEP team is looking at the reevaluation to determine strengths and needs. Also, too, we want to make sure that you are sharing any updates. So if, for example, your child has an updated IEP with the IU during this process, please make sure to continue to keep the district and the IU in the loop on any updated programming so that we're aware. And then the other piece too is when we're developing these IEPs, the start date is always the first day of kindergarten, so of the following school year. And again, our goal is to work collaboratively with families so that we're developing appropriate programming to provide educational benefit for kindergarten. Just connecting parts of the IEP. A school age IEP does look a little bit different than the IEP in early intervention. So the first piece that we're looking at the IEP meeting and when developing the IEP is the present levels of academic and functional performance. So a lot of this information in our IEPs from the reevaluation from these transition meetings, this information in step 1 is coming from the reevaluation report, and that reevaluation report is driving the programming. So we're looking at present levels, we're identifying and prioritizing student needs. So we might have a student who has needs identified in many different areas, but it's important for us to prioritize and really develop that path for success, because when we're setting those measurable goals, we're looking at goals for the child to accomplish in 1 year. So we really want to be able to prioritize the needs and then set measurable goals. Then the next step is we are, as a team, developing specially designed instructions to be able to teach your child the skills that are developed in the IEP goals. And then the last step is determining placement in the least restrictive environment. So we are looking at the IEP that was developed and how we can meet the needs in the least restrictive environment. Which brings us to our next step. So we would then look at, like I said, after developing that IEP, we're looking at the recommended placement. So we're looking here at different types of special education support that we can provide in the school age setting, as well as the amount of special ed support. So we are able to offer autistic support, emotional support, multidisability support, blind and visually impaired support, learning support, physical support, deaf and hard of hearing, life skills support, and speech and language, all depending on really that IEP and what your child needs and what type of special ed support will best meet their needs. If your child is eligible for related services such as speech, OT, PT, hearing and vision, we also provide related services to students who are eligible. When we're looking at the amount of support, an itinerant level of support is for a child who's receiving special education support for 20% or less of the school day. Supplemental, more than 20%, but less than 80%. And then our full-time special education support is when the child is getting support from special education staff for 80% or more of the school day. We would then look at issuing the notice of recommended educational placement, which summarizes everything that the team will talk about in the IEP meeting. On the NOREP, the notice of recommended educational placement, it will spell out for you the amount of support and type of support that we're recommending. So for example, there might be a student that we recommend for supplemental emotional support. The NOREP will say that and explain why. And then you as the parent have 3 options. Once we issue the NOREP, you can approve the recommendation, request an informal meeting, or if you do not approve the action or recommendation, you would need to then follow the next steps at that point. And there's just an example of what the NOREP looks like down below there. The one thing I did want to highlight that we're really proud of in Springford is the programming that we have. So our Autistic Support program, I will turn to Katie Eller to talk about that.
Hi, my name is Katie Eller, and I'm an autistic support teacher at UPE, and I used to be at Limerick as well. Our autistic support program is very language-based, and it's a very low student to teacher support staff ratio. All of our instructions are are highly individualized and based on the principles of ABA. We also do a lot of augmentative and alternative communication methodologies. During our programs, we work a lot on learner behavior, coming to the table, following directions, being able to get out your own materials, becoming more independent in the classroom environment. Really trying to build those requisites to become stronger so they can to build inclusion opportunities in the regular ed environment. We offer modified and alternative curriculum, as well as we always expose them to the regular ed curriculum as well. We do a lot of functional communication training because a lot of our friends have maladaptive NANs. Basically, they don't know how to appropriately communicate, and sometimes you'll see behaviors. So we do a lot of communication training, whether it be low tech or high tech. It's all the communication training is dependent on the strengths of the child. It's not one size fits all. We do community-based instruction, which is fantastic. We get parental input on about what they would like their children's skills to improve in the community, and we work on that in the classroom and then transfer it out and generalize it to the community. That's been a little different with COVID, but we have hopefully that will become more robust when the world continues to open up. We work very closely with the BCBA. We work as a team with the BCBA. We look at the data, we look at programming, we look at how long mastered tasks have taken to acquire. That is a collaborative environment. We also work with our OTs, our PTs, our speech and language pathologists, as well as related services. Well, they are the related services, but we also do have adapted specials, and the adapted specials are just places where we can pre-teach and reteach lessons within the regular ed specials environment. We love inclusion. We see inclusion as a true benefit, not only to our students, but to all the students of the school. It's amazing to see what inclusion does for a community. And we're very proud of all of our students with all their inclusive mindsets. I've seen such growth in all children with all kinds of needs or all kinds of abilities. It's just very cool. And we do try to make meaningful inclusion opportunities whenever we get the chance. And basically, we really want to empower our children to become as independent as possible, not only within the school community, but within the community as a whole. We practice a lot of daily living skills, safety skills, communication skills. Our programs are very robust and very collaborative with the family. We always work as a team. We love working with the families. We love working with the related specialists, and everything we do is highly specialized and individualized, and we've seen tremendous growth, and we're very proud of what we do.
Thank you, Katie. I think I'm jumping in here next. My name is Chris Talley, and currently I'm one of the emotional support teachers at Upper Providence Elementary School. And a little bit about the emotional support program within the district. We have 3 full classrooms at Upper Providence Elementary School, K through 4, and then Evans Elementary School has 2 classrooms, K through 4. And to put it in context, when I started within the district about 10 years ago, we had 2.5 classrooms throughout the whole district, all housed at Upper Providence Elementary School. So that's kind of twofold because I think society and everybody kind of realized the emphasis and the importance of the social and emotional piece of the school age students program was kind of becoming more important. And the best part about it is Springford has recognized that and created the 5 classrooms to make sure that we're addressing the needs that are paramount today, especially for those young students coming from the early intervention process. Our classrooms are designed for students with social and emotional or behavioral needs. The early intervention process is huge for us as teachers because essentially what we're getting is all the information that Amy and Kenya kind of talked about is kind of delivered to us on a silver platter, so to speak. And it's such an advantage because then we have all of this information accessible and we can game plan and individualize the program for the students that are transitioning to Upper Providence or Evans. So that process is such an advantage for us. So we can get to know them, you know, even though it's on paper, we're able to program a little bit better. And the students that typically transition into our programs, they're experiencing, you know, an emotional difficulty in and out of the traditional classroom setting. And that can look like a variety of things. It could be students with low self-esteem or self-confidence, anxiety or depression, or just maybe not the confidence where they don't have kindergarten ready skills and they don't have the confidence and they're too young to express their frustrations. A lot of the students in the emotional support program have difficulty maintaining positive relationships and they exhibit atypical behaviors or experience trauma. Within the program, they require a structured, specialized learning environment with low student to staff ratio, which is another benefit for our program because a typical kindergarten classroom, you know, you might have anywhere from 19 to 24 students, where we have a much smaller setting and we're able to address their needs in that small group environment, which is a lot of times all the student really needs is that more individualized one-on-one time. A lot of times they require modified instructional schedule to minimize the transitions during the school day. That is another great advantage of the program at Upper Providence and Evans because with the small group and the modified schedule, you're able to get the academic piece, but then you can spend the bulk of the time addressing the social and emotional needs, which is essentially why they are in the program. Some of the services that we provide and some of the, I guess, tricks that we're teaching the students is we really want them to develop tools to recognize and manage their feelings. A lot of replacement behaviors. So for example, when a student gets frustrated, they might throw a pencil or shut down and just refuse to do work for the next half an hour. And what we, you know, are trying to develop with the student is to incorporate a replacement behavior or chill skills, like we call it at Upper Providence and Evans. So instead of throwing the pencil out of anger, maybe we're doing, you know, at the elementary level, bunny breaths, and we're teaching them to breathe like a bunny for 10 seconds, or we're going to get up and we're going to move and do some heavy lifting instead of, you know, throwing the paper or shutting down. So replacement strategies are a big part of the curriculum. And we're developing thinking strategies to promote self-regulation skills and build self-confidence. You know, a lot of times, you know, a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old is transitioning into the emotional support program and they might not have the kindergarten ready skills and they're just not confident in their ability and they act out. So we're teaching them to help regulate their frustrations. A lot of what we do, you know, revolves around the mindfulness and the relationship building. You know, that's kind of all day at Upper Providence and Evans Elementary is the relationship building, taking turns, sharing. We spend a week learning how to line up because, you know, a lot of times everybody just wants to be first in line and we have to spend, you know, a day that, you know, it doesn't matter who's first in line, we're all going to get there at the same time. And then another resource that we're fortunate enough to have at Springford is the Lakeside Counseling Service that really kind of digs in more individually to the mental health aspect of the students that we have in the program. You know, as teachers, we're working on the replacement behaviors and and everything, but the counseling service through Lakeside, they come in and build the relationships with the students and kind of, dig in a little bit deeper and have that one-on-one time with the students, which we found, as a tremendous benefit as well. And then we're offering behavior support through the FBAs, that the functional behavior assessment and the positive behavior support plans that we work in conjunction with the behavior therapists that work for Springford as well. That is a quick overview of the emotional support program. I'm going to turn it back over to our leader, Amy Hiller.
Thanks, Chris, and thank you, Katie. One other specialized program that we do have within our district is our life skills support program. So we have our early learning and communication classroom at Evans Elementary School. Another very language enriched program with a low student to staff ratio. We offer the modified and alternate early and literacy math curriculum in that classroom as well. And we're really looking at providing services to students in academics, functional communications, and the daily living skills within that program. Providing meaningful access to the general ed curriculum through rich and engaging evidence-based instruction. Again, we're, like Katie had mentioned, we're really focused on building that path to independence for our students. This program also offers community-based instruction, but like Katie said, we have been kind of proceeding with caution here during the COVID times. We hope to hope things get back to normal soon there. There's integrated related services and adapted PE within this program. And then also too, always looking for successful inclusion opportunities within the program. So those three, autistic support, emotional support, and life skills support programming, they are our specialized classrooms that we have for our students who need more of a supplemental or full-time special education support. I did want to mention we do have 7 elementary schools within Springford, and there's lots of different levels of special education support. So not all of our students transitioning to kindergarten go to one of these programs. It would really depend on the IEP and how much of a level of support the child needs. We really are looking at the least restrictive environment, which would be programming for the child within their home school. But there are cases where programming might not be, we might be looking at programming that is not at the home school, and that would be then at one of these specialized programs that we just went through. All right. Actually going to, so the roles of teachers and therapists, I did want to highlight, and I think, Jen, if you wanted to talk about the roles within early intervention, and then Katie, if you want to talk about school age.
Sure, absolutely. So we can, looking there at the top of the chart, the special education teacher or special instructor, we call them also an SI or an itinerant teacher in early intervention, many names for our specialized instructor. That person is providing that support to your child. So working on those IEP goals, direct support. So on your child's IEP, there's probably direct special instruction listed as an IEP level service. That person typically isn't your child's case manager. You probably have an ongoing case manager assigned. So that person is going to look a little bit different as your child transitions to school age, because I believe that role is taken a little bit differently as a special education teacher. Katie, you want to explain the difference then there? Okay.
So in the school age setting, the head teacher or the lead teacher or head teacher or classroom teacher is typically your case manager. And that person is the direct support to you and your family. We kind of coordinate all the services, coordinate all the communication. We really take the more of the lead role. But again, we are working as a team at all times. But in the school age setting, the teacher really does take the lead of the role. We do a lot of specially designed instruction, and we determine where all that will happen within the school community. As well as we're going to collect and monitor data, we will handle the progress reports on our specialized goals, etc. So, And we also work with the general ed teachers to create times for successful inclusion within the environments.
So the next position, a behavior specialist. In early intervention, a behavior specialist is, although it's a BSc or behavior consult that it looks like, it is actually a direct service to your child. So if your child is in early intervention and has BSc behavior support on their IEP, that is a direct service where that behavior specialist is going into the preschool or attending an itinerant session and working with your child to work on those behavior strategies. We often encourage that co-treat model. So they are working with the other team members, but if they are providing consult to you or to the team, that's actually a different service that's usually on the IEP. So our behavior specialist in early intervention is a direct support to the student. We can provide support in the home or in the school environment, but also that's called a behavior specialist consult. That would be a separate service on the IEP.
And in the school age setting, it's more of an indirect service where I work very closely with our BSc. It truly is based on more of an indirect service where she helps me analyze the data, progress monitor, and program for individual students. But again, she is more of a collaborative member of the team versus the direct point person. So I do consider that more of an indirect service in our setting, in the school age setting. They also do a lot of trainings for staff as well as within the district.
And the related service provider or providers, which can include occupational therapy, physical therapy, vision, hearing support, I mean, a wide variety of different things, but those itinerant level therapists in early intervention, they are your direct support for that. They're going to provide that direct service to students. They can be your direct support for parent contact, and all of those related service providers are working together as a team. They may co-treat, and then they go to the ongoing case manager to provide input, but that's a direct service to your child. And finally, this one probably looks a little bit similar for its school age.
Our related service providers do provide direct service to our students. However, they can provide it directly within their own environments. They push in a lot, which I love. So that's fantastic. When we look at skill sets when the related service providers look at skill sets within our children and where they might have deficits, we try to aim that to how we can build on those deficits for them to be able to be more independent within the school environment. So we look at where they look at where they can heighten the child's classroom experience through their services.
All right, thank you. Just some activities to help your child adjust to the transition, keeping us informed, both the IU and the district team throughout the process, and making sure to register for any message boards within Springford or your elementary school, any open houses that would happen in the spring or transition activities happening within your neighborhood elementary school, to just stay in the loop there to help with that smooth transition. After the IEP meeting as well, you'll have a better idea if for any reason your child is not going to the neighborhood school and the team is recommending another school for a specialized program. At that point, you could talk to that IEP team, and we have worked with families on smooth transitions throughout the summer so that they're able to transition smoothly for kindergarten. And then the last slide, I stole this from the IU presentation that I attended on Monday. I thought it was really important when looking at perspective. So looking at this first picture here, there's two different ways to look at it. There's either the young woman here with her hair and then her nose here and her chin, or the old woman with this is her hair and then her nose and her chin here. Same with the duck rabbit, whether or not you see a duck with a beak or the rabbit over here with the ears. The reason I thought this was a really nice visual was just that your school team, the school team and parent might be looking at the same, or might be looking at the same thing, but looking at it differently. And it's really important to understand each other's perspectives, because we're all here for the same reason, which is for your child, and to make sure your child has that successful transition in kindergarten. All right, Andrew, I'll turn it back to you.
Hello, so we have 2 questions. The one I'm not sure I completely understand, but I will ask it to the best of my ability. You might understand it when I start talking about it. We have a question: with these programs like life skills, will the child be only in these classrooms, or will they also be included in this? I don't understand the exact question, but will they also be included in the day-to-day throughout the school? I think that's what she's trying to ask.
Sure, I can take that. They would be included in both. So we would be looking at inclusion time within the kindergarten classroom as well as the special education classroom. And all of that would be determined at the IEP meeting with the IEP team when we're looking at percentages within the least restrictive environment.
Okay, and then one more question. Does Royersford Elementary have any special classrooms? That is where one of our attendees' child is supposed to go, and she'd just like to know.
Sure. So within all 7 elementary schools, we do have special education support in all 7. So at Royersford, yes, we do have special education teachers that can provide special education support. When we're looking at the low incidence programming that we went through, at this time, Royersford does not have that specialized program. So if the child needs like a full-time autistic support setting, we would be looking at Upper Providence or Limerick. But if the child's needs are not at the level of full-time, or a full-time in need of that specialized program, we would look at developing or implementing the IEP within the homeschool.
And that is all the questions.
All right. Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. And thank you to our presenters.